I'm tired of all those popcorn sites looking alike, so today we're going to go ahead and rebuild the Stay New England site using popcorn. So as you can see in here, we're going and just scrolling down the Stay New England site just so you can kind of get an understanding of what they actually have on it. I would suggest going to take a look at his site when you get a chance because it is an interesting take on simplicity and less on being busy and trying to have the site do everything possible. As you can see, it's very much not a popcorn theme layout based on the traditional setup. So today I think is a good time to go back through and explore how we do some of these pieces and make popcorn look just like this site. So with any building, we're going to go ahead and start by installing our theme. So you just go to themes, you're going to go ahead and I personally like to clear out old themes and we're going to install popcorn. This way you see starting from total scratch without anything pre-added. Go ahead and activate it and install Gutenberg's advanced plugin. When you're running on a local install like this, sometimes it's a little bit slower. So we'll go on and do the license and activate. So what we have going on now is getting everything just in place so that we can start creating. The downloaded version wasn't the new 2.2 release that Phil had just released, so I had to update and clear off this other one. So now we're clean. We're on the brand new version. You can go take a look at the site and get the normal front end. So this is our canvas to start with. This is the Stay New England site that we're going to just work from as we go through. And for this setup, we're going to go into the editor. I'm going to go ahead and save the images because it's easier than trying to recreate them in Canva with another one. When you're trying to make a design match, it's nicer to just use their same resources. If you're going to make something similar, then the best move is to make your own, but you can use these as a guide sometimes to help you make sure that you're doing things in the right size and order and look. When you add the image, it adds that tagline as a section for that inline, so we got to go ahead and remove the tagline. So you can just easily click the three dots and delete. Now it'll get rid of that part. And then when you're looking at this, you can see the spacing, and there's a lot of spacing. But this is where all the controls are for each of these parts. And most of the groups contain the width elements, as you'll see. And so what we're looking at is just how you build and manage the header and our width itself. So in this case, I do believe we'll have to go look at their site for how wide it is because it feels like it's thinner than a standard 1200 pixel width that we use inside Popcorn. Most of the stuff for a header you don't need to change, but some of the stuff within the header you do want to actually adjust depending. So like personally, I get rid of the padding so that the image is the thing that causes the most width. And then I try to get rid of side to side padding because I want it to go edge to edge. Because when you go and look at their example, you'll see that there's runs edge to edge. And then you can measure. I've got a Chrome plugin that just does measurements. It's just easier when you see it. So there's about 1,000 pixels wide. And so I think 1,000 will be a nice place to work from. So within here, you can go to the theme controls or to the template and block controls, those two on the side, and then you have your main structure panel. So between these is where you do all of the settings that you would need for your actual layout itself. And as you see, you can play around with these to get them just perfect and get the padding just right to match what you need it to match. But then you can go ahead and back out of the inline header and move over to the templates, which is where your front page is. So this is that front normal page that you get when you load the site itself. And you'll see it's made of different sections. What we need to do is change out the header container over to that inline that we just were modifying. In which case, right now, we have this one, and instead we're going to go ahead and replace it and move over to the inline header that we built. So now you can see it just pulls in that one that we built already, And now we can go over to the layout and go check and make sure what we want is 1,000 pixels. You go, oh, I probably need to make that 1,000. So once you make that 1,000, now you're set on just the header portion. So every group and every section below has a width you're going to have to manage and maintain. But when you're looking at these, you can grab and replicate these. So when I go in here and you try and create a page, it wants to create a page and draft for it. We want to cancel that. And then what we're going to do is actually go over to the structure settings itself. So when you're in here, now you're in navigation. Now you can go into here and you can actually create these. And then a pound sign basically is just a placeholder. Then you move back. Make yourself a whole bunch of copies, because obviously I just have to do this over and over again for each of their options. And then what we do is just copy and save this, because we're going to need that next. And we're going to go ahead and click into, because I can't spell. This is going to go wrong. Oh, I did get that one right. Okay, so the next one is Vermont, short. Massachusetts, I know I'm going to murder. This is, yeah, this is when we need to go copy and paste, because this is just not good. We're just going to open this because I can't get it, and copy and paste. And then the same, replace out the last one with our last one. So quick click and copy, paste it in, click and copy, paste it in. So now you got those all in place. What we can do is go over to the settings, text. We can change the color. So what we want to do is they've got that green. So I've got another handy plugin to give me colors. So what we're going to do is go ahead and grab a color from their site of that green. And then we're going to go ahead and swap out the color, but you have to click on the dotted part above. So where it says no color selected is a little bit backwards from normal. What you want to do is click in that section, and then you can go ahead and add your color. What we're going to do afterwards, though, is we're going to go swap that color out in the actual template. So over here, you can go into the template, go to the colors, open the palette, and just replace out the primary color with what the primary color on the site is. This will just make it easier to change all those colors out should you decide to change your primary color down the road. And then all these things will change all at the same time instead of changing them one by one. So we'll just swap this color out to that same green. This way it's got that color holding throughout the site itself. And if we have to change that green to blue later, when we change the blue, it'll just change all of them at the same time instead of having to manually go back and find them and swap them out. Now we can look and go, the font is way bigger than it is on theirs. So if we go into the block settings itself and take a look at the navigation, we can go in and actually make a tweak and make the font itself smaller. So what we want to do is change this, and I probably accept small is the best match. And you'll see when we save it, it definitely looks like it's a good match. So when you refresh, they're nice and small. There isn't currently a search option the same inside Gutenberg, so I'm gonna skip the search in the menu just because the search block itself is an uglier version, and I don't have a clean way to do that I would like to do. What we're going to do now is change out the overall background color. This background color we want to be white because most of their site is all pure white, and so I want to switch it from that lighter gray over to the whiter color. This way it kind of runs more as a similar color and you lose that gray background more in favor of a white. So now we can move on to our next part of the site itself, which is going to be adding that middle part for their logo itself. That's right in the middle. And since we saved it already, this should be pretty straightforward. So what we're going to do is move into the next section, which is getting that logo in place at the top. So we have the featured, but you can just click here on the plus, and then you can go ahead and look at what's here for options. I didn't necessarily like any of those ones. I just wanted the normal image, but there's issues if you put an image to a certain extent this way, is that the content itself is going to be too wide, so your image is going to show up goofy on one side. Oops, select the wrong one. Sorry. Let me grab the right one. So you'll see here it is, and it's allows you to just choose and play the settings and organize how you want to organize. But as you'll note, there's no actual center alignment, which is what I was trying to show there. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add a row. 1 second while I go search for this. Oh, why am I typing container? There's no containers. I got to change back. So there's a row, which is basically straight across, or group, which is when you want to group multiple things together into one box. So here we're going to go with row. We're just going to choose a single item, which is going to be that main site logo. And then from here, we can go ahead and shrink it up a little bit so that it's more aligned with the style they have. So when we go look, now it's up there at the top, like it is when you go look at their example. And then now we're basically to where we need to be there. When you look in here, though, you can look at the spacing, and like the other things, you can play with the spacing a little bit. And you'll note when you change the spacing for blocks, it messes with the whole menu and everything else, because they're all kind of blocks to themselves. So 12 seems to be about a good spacing. It's probably a little bit tight still versus the example, but moving it bigger doesn't help it stay any more clear necessarily. So we're going to stick there and move on to the ConvertKit section. Now, I don't have ConvertKit, so I'm going to just put what would be a placeholder there, because I'm assuming they give you an HTML code for a form. So we're going to build it that way. In which case, for me, that means just deleting out that whole section itself so that we can make the space for that form to be there. And I'm slowly but surely pruning everything away. I could have done this faster by just selecting the hero section and deleting it out that way. But in this case, you can play around with things, because you can choose to use this as the form holder. But if you do that, you got to play around with some of these settings to try and make it be more correct to the space. But I'm pretty sure in the end, my best way forward is to just create it brand new. So there we go. Now that we've purged that out, we're going to go ahead and create another row, because we can do the same thing with custom HTML, and then we can just align the row itself to the middle. So this will need some formatting more than likely when you have their form. I'm assuming their form will grow to whatever size it needs to be, but I don't have a lot of experience with ConvertKit in their forms, so I just wanted to create the space there, so if somebody was going to go ahead and add that, they would have it within this ready to go. Because once it's there, it'll fill up with its code that'll look like that. I don't have access to any code, and I didn't want to just take a screenshot of it. I wanted it to be filled out where you could actually utilize it. So now that we're through that part, we can go ahead and look at the next part, which is their separation with a little line before you start moving into actual content. And space-wise, 40 pixels basically. So inside here, it's easy enough because we can actually just go increase the spacing itself and just kind of replicate that same distance. Now we can grab that gray just so we get the same similar look, and again apply it to the background. This way it's kind of following their same lead. So when you get there, you're going to have that little gray section. And then after that part, it's more thinking about what we're going to do for moving forward. We've got to make sure that we're the same width. So that 1,000 pixels, you just want to make sure it's always set on each section. But in this case, I still looking wrong. Yeah, still 1,200. So I've got to go figure out why it's still 1,200. So when you look, it's 1,000 and 1,000. So whenever you see those kind of things, then my inside thing is correct. You need to move up the chain of objects to find which one is actually. So in this case, the hero section has to be 1,000 pixels by 1,000 pixels. Otherwise, you end up with problems because when you want the consistent width, those are all driven by that 1,000 and 1,000 that's set at the actual hero side. So you got to just make sure you're at the base, and you'll be able to select and make sure it's set to that same width. So in the hero, you go to those same settings. The row itself, the group itself, that's where you want to set all those, because it's basically the initial container itself. So what we're going to do real quick now is just to go back in and give that spacer side. So in this case, backing down to that hero, and then there we go. In this case, we're trying to get to that group because the group sets the width, and you'll notice it's 1,200, so it needs to be 1,000. When you're trying to maintain that same width across the board, you got to make sure you keep setting those across the board. And then you can go in here, you can double check all your settings and setup itself. So you can give yourself that 40 pixels that we gave it before, just to maintain that same spacing. And then we can add that border effect at the top real quick with that same off color itself. So probably do 1 or 2 pixels. We'll see once we have color. So grab that gray again and put the gray back in. And it just puts that little extra bar there. So probably end up moving this up a little bit. So it's just to make that little border at the top itself, so it's a little bit pronounced. So now when we're inside here, we can start looking at the actual columns and the setup themselves. Since there's 3 in the column already, and there's 3 in the column on the other side, we can duplicate. Now we can go ahead and we can add that header in. So we're just going to grab a paragraph and put it in here. And that's just to make that space in there. And then with slash, you can choose header really easy by just doing slash head. And then H2 is what I would expect them to be. They used images, which is weird, but it is what it is. It's not good SEO wise. So I'm going to put explore, and we'll go ahead and mess with it, make it a little bit smaller. I just want it to, I don't want it to be too gigantic on the screen in the first place. And then we'll give it a class so that later, if we want to, we could give it that underline. I don't know if we'll put that in here or not, because that's little CSS. It doesn't really accomplish much, but you can make it look a little bit more like it if you really want to. So we'll just put that class there so it exists, because that way it's a chance to come back to it later if we choose to. That way inside here, when you refresh, now look at what it's starting to look like. So now you can go look at these things and go check them. And you'll see I'm just trying to make sure I've got everything set to 1,200 pixels wide, where I'm missing one of them being at the right width. I'm pretty sure I've got the one hero section still wrong. But so what we're going to do here is just go ahead and we're going to duplicate out. Since there's 3 across on the initial version, we're going to go ahead and just duplicate out this already existing 3 columns, because it's just a much more straightforward way to do this. So we'll duplicate, and this will give us that layout, because we need to have at least 6 to match with what they have in their design. So now we've got 6, and we line up the exact same as how their site does. This way we can just edit those instead and get those functioning to do what we need them to do. And then you'll note that each one of these can be easily fit inside one of these and still maintain about the exact same spacing that they had. So it's a pretty nice one-to-one for us. So we're going to go ahead and delete them. And these are images, so we're just going to save the image. And instead, we're just going to go ahead and replace this out with an image itself. So we can upload their image directly in. And you're going to see it looks almost exactly the same right out of the box. And then we can link these to the categories that we created. So into main, for example. And then you just basically replicate it. So you select the whole container, purge, whole container, and then purge. And then you can start just fitting in those images again, because it's a real quick process to build this section out. So you just select the whole thing, delete, the whole thing, delete, and then whole part, delete, and then add 3 more images. And then you just link the images to the categories that you create. In this case, I didn't create all the categories currently, so we're going to just place some of these in place so they'll be there, but you could go easily make them a setup for yourself. I don't know if I would like to go images. Images don't have as much value for something that's crawling your site as if you were to build this with real text inside those boxes saying Vermont and having a background image of the state image. But that's a minor thing and is just a little bit more work itself in the end to go set up that way. But for this instance, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of follow how they did it. That way it's not changing what they did itself. So I'm going to keep saving these. And get ourselves all set up and through. Super boring. But these are the parts that you go through, right? As you go step by step by step. Basically, these were all made, it looks like, with some tool that allowed to cut out of the state. And then like a Canva lineup that was set up to be run in a specific resolution here, like 512 by 512. So it's just easy to replicate over and over and over again. Then when you go look, you see we're starting to already look a lot like them, but they don't have any featured section. They just have recent content. So for us, we're good spacing wise. We just want to kill this featured post section, and that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, Control Z, undo. What we want instead is to actually just go find that section and delete that part, because we want this latest post area. We want to shift that back over to the left, and then we want to change this itself to match the above settings that we did for the Explore side. So changing the font size is what we really want to do. So if we're going to go medium here, then we want to go medium there. If we do large here, we want to do large there. So we just kind of got to play and see what we have for each one. Additionally, on this one, we have the font set as capitals, which I don't really appreciate because it's kind of horrible. But you select front page, and now we can do the size. So we can go back over here, and we can look at the group. And once we're in the group, we can actually set this to be that 1,000 pixels again. So we got to turn on using a width, set it to 1,000. Pulls it all in nice and pretty, aligns it with the other ones. And you want to go ahead and then you go save. You can take a look on the front end and then go, oh, yeah, we didn't fix the latest post part. So we can go back and change this and edit it, and it'll look nice. Turn off caps, and we want it lowercase. Latest post, or oh no, recent. He calls it recent. So back to change it recent. And then this way we're already aligning to what they have, because we already have a 3-column set up for post below it. But we do need to copy out that advanced side so that we do that same accent. So if we go add an accent afterwards, it'll apply it to both of them. All right, so now those are there if we ever go there. Now we can start looking at how they format those. So we can clean this up. For me, I want to change the height because these are not the same. They're not 250 pixels high. It looks like visually we're going to get 166, 167, so we could choose one of those two to set the size to. So with these, once we have that 166 set, we can look at the different options. I think in the end we're still going to stick with cover so that it fills in the space. But then we've got to start trying to play around with what we've got for these stuff. So as you can see, they've got their category above. So they're doing a category, then a title. So we need to figure out a category and getting a category above us inside this card itself. So as you see, you can work your way up through the group with this. You could also turn on the editor on the top with the 3 offset lines and see the stack itself too. I just like to work my way backwards sometimes through when I'm looking at stuff, trying to see how many things exist in there. And what I want to do is just pull in this so that we get that same card effect that they have, where it's kind of inset from the edges of the card itself and inside the image. So now they've got the date. So we've got to figure out the date and then the categories. It doesn't look like we have an option to convert these. I was hoping that there was an option to convert. So we're probably just going to have to purge it because there isn't an option. All right, delete. And then basically we need to add before. So you can do add and before and get our block. We're going to have to go fix the size again because the size is going to be too wide, but we got to make it something first. So we can search category, I think CIT. It's been a while since I've looked at the post options itself. So there's categories. So, no, that's not the right one. All right. Okay, delete it. And then now we're going to go ahead and do categories. We don't want the... As you'll see, we did term description. Term description itself it's either that or categories. And then that should load on the front end. So we're going to go ahead and set a few things so that it would kind of look how we'd want it to, with the font size being smaller. You can change and add in this actual letter case so we can get the full capitals. And then it'll be full capitals and hopefully the category. And then we can go ahead and change the text over to that green. And then we can, look, they've got black text. So we probably need to go clean up this link and make sure that our link is in black text also, and the font size. So since we want smaller, we're going to have to go shrink this. So we need to go over here, and then we can go over to size and see if any of these look about the right size for us. If so, then we probably are fine. And what we can do at that point is change their color. So you'd think it would be text because it's text, but you'll see text black doesn't apply because it's actually a link. So what you need to do is instead you have to go to link, and then you have to change the text for link color. And then we can set a hover color that's a little bit lighter, just so that way when you hover on it, you get that little hint of a change that's just kind of a visual input for people. So you can do hover on that same one to the right of default, select the same black, and to me, I just go highlight and move it over to the left on transparency. That way it just does a little bit of a highlight change when you hover over it, and it's the same color, so you don't have to worry about it. So we add after. For add after, we've got the same problem. We've got to go ahead and we've got to figure out what the date is. So we can do the post modified or post date. I'm typically tend to prefer the post date because, like most people, I've just adjusted to changing the date. When I do a big update, I just change the date to the current date instead of leaving it as an edited version of the old date and just relying on Google to decide that the updated date is the date to use. So inside here, we can go ahead and stretch out these pieces back out, which is when we're looking here, we're looking at the post template itself. So the setup itself has all the different sections. And then what we want to do is just make sure that we go in and we actually take away that padding on the sides so that the image goes out wider. So we're going to pull that back and let that image go all the way to the edges. But then that leaves us with padding at the top. So what we need to do is break that out and then select top and pull the top spacing away. So now that image goes all the way to the top and all the way to the left and right sides. That way the image is looking more and more like the card on their side does. So when you refresh here, now you get that card. But since we're missing an image, we got to go ahead and add an image to the post. So we can go in and we can just edit the post. And inside here, we can just go ahead and add a featured image real quick so that we have something to reference. So I'm just going to grab it real quick out of here so we have a good copy. And then we'll go add it to that post just as a good example. So once it's inside here, though, now when you go save and we go back to the front end, we can go back to the front page, and then we'll get the layout we're expecting. We see more of that card, and we see the space, but we see we didn't get our category, so we must have chose the wrong block type. So what we can do is figure out how we messed that up. So it's inside here, we should make ourselves a category. First case, make it all the same, so we're working from the same thing. So now when we look, we're still not seeing anything. We would have seen, hopefully, at least uncategorized, but since we didn't get it right, we're not seeing it there. So instead what we got to do is go take a look at what we chose, and it's obviously not term description. So instead, we've got to go in and choose to replace this out with I think the one that we saw that was category itself. I think term description is actually used on archive pages. So if you were to do a page specifically for category for each archive type, then you use that one. That's my bad. And we can't swap it out, so we're going to just have to add a new one and then categories, which kind of makes sense when you think about it. And then you can add a prefix or after suffix if you want to. I don't ever add more things to them. I'm trying to keep them small and to the point, but sometimes certain people will like to have it say category, colon category name. So then we got to make the padding the same, the 4. Now we go to the front end and refresh. Hey, now we've got a Rhode Island. So now we're getting there. Our card is starting to look a lot like their card does. So what you can do here, though, is go in here, clean up your pieces. We can fix some of the radius stuff so that there's not the soft edge that we have on most the popcorn images, because theirs comes to a point, really, when you look at it. It's not rounded off. So we're just cleaning up to make sure we're kind of looking more and more like theirs. And you'll see they're squared off on all the corners. So we're going to go ahead and square off ours. But they've got some spacing and some nicer, white space on their cards. So we can look and see. Again, handy dandy tool. There's 33 and 45. Yeah. So probably do like 40 and 40. Again, just trying to keep, when you do sizes, you try to keep somewhat the same across the board so that the white spacing always looks fairly organized. Without the same controls, we can just kind of use the padding that's here to adjust, or we can go ahead and turn them on, because we don't want it all the way around on that item. We just want it on the top for that item. So in this case, we can go ahead and pull just the top spacing and give ourselves visually a kind of that break. And then the bottom is the same thing. We're going to need to go ahead and turn on padding for just the bottom. And then we want to stretch out the bottom the same kind of way, equal to that top one, so the cards are fairly uniform itself, spacing top and bottom. So if you're at 3, then you want to do 3 on both sides, so that way the card looks spaced out well. So now it's starting to look more like their card. And this way you're getting closer and closer to that end result. Now, obviously, the more posts you have, you can see how they all look, and you'd have a more layout. What we're going to do here, though, is jump into this next section, which, since they don't have this reader blog, we can go ahead and just purge this. So you move up to the group, and we want to just delete this group. We don't need it. It doesn't align with what we're trying to make. So at this point, we're going to have to go ahead and insert after this front page element. And then in here, we can look at how the layout is done and make that decision. So for me, it's a group, because you're going to make one group and it's split 50-50. So when you look at the image, right, it's like 50% image, 50% content. So you need to make a 50-50 split. And then you're going to have to make that one be an image. So you're adding an image on that side. And then on the other side, you gotta go ahead and add that. You can do a fixed. If you want to make it easier, you can set a fix so it won't go over that amount. So we'll do 50% or 45%. So we'll get a little bit of a white space in between. And then we add after. Oops, not add after. It should have been add after the image, because it's separate from the row that we want it to be within. So what we need to do is drag it back inside, because we messed up. We need to drag we messed up, and it should be inside there. So drag it back up and in. Okay, so now inside here we need to add one more group, because we actually need the text to go up and down here. So here's where you are building a group to build a group, and one's going to hold horizontally, this one's going to hold us vertically. That way we can add our content inside here in easy layers, so they can be like theirs, where you see this is a heading, then there's another heading, and then there's the text itself afterwards. But you got to do these in a realignment so that you can actually get this laid out this way. So when you do this, you can go add these sections. So we'll add another one, clean this up, make it small because it's small inside theirs. And then we can go ahead and make the stack heading. Okay, so now this will be that H3 from above. So we got to go grab it off of their side. And we can justify it to the middle if we want to. But we'll do that for spacing that we did on all the others, so that it kind of maintains that same white space between elements and gives us that little break. And then they've got this heading, which has two colors. So when you go put it in here, it's easy enough. We can copy and paste, and you can easily copy inside Popcorn, highlight this, and then you can easily just click the little arrow down and do highlight. And then the green is right there as a color, and we're already highlighted in that same color now. So now we've already duplicated theirs in a half a second. And then align center for the text. And then we got the next row. There we go. So you find the middle itself. When you do the stack, you can find a justification for the stack. And you can center it. Since it's all centered and this text is centered, this works out pretty well. So you can go add another one, and we'll just paste in this text again. And now we're already starting to look like we were on that side. Align it center. And now we're looking all good. So now we're getting all this together. And then what we have to do again here is understand what we want out of the button. So I'm going to copy that image. So we'll come over here and grab this one. And really, honestly, all these pictures should be, if you're going to put on pictures, all these should go through like Squish, through something itself to make them be smaller file sizes, because these are all gigantic. It's an optimization you could probably use on his site to increase load speed a little bit, but if they're deferred, it's less bothersome. It's just a large page load. So the last thing we're missing is just basically this button that'll take you over to the About page itself. So we'll go ahead and do that over here. And just like the others, we can do add after. And button is pretty cool. It creates the buttons, and you can easily just paste in your text. So what we need to do is, there's a lot of different defaults that Phil has made for different button types, but we're just going to go down and make this clear. So we're going to basically give it a white interior with black text, so it looks like their example. We need a border on it, so we need at least 1 pixel around it to give it that button outside look. And then radius probably at least 45 or higher to get that rounded pill look that they have. Then basically you want to go ahead and mess around with that padding, just make it a little bit smaller, make it fit, and adjust that padding so it gets super close. And then once you've got those things in place, then you've got your nice pretty look. So It could probably have some font adjustment, and you can make some minor tweaks to make it look even more like that. But we're not going to go ahead and push on that because it's not drastically important. We're going to go ahead and pull everything right inside here. And then we're going to go ahead and actually group this top stuff. When we group the top stuff, now we can take that group and center align it. And that bottom button will keep the original stack's right side alignment. So now when you refresh, you get to see this pretty looking picture on the front. And you'll see it's too wide. Again, when building everything, that messed up and didn't actually look at the width to make sure it was that 1,000 pixels that we've been forcing on everything else. So we can go back in here and go back to the row. We need to make it a group, right? So we're going to take this because the group has the controls. So we're going to take this and we're going to actually convert over to a group at the bottom. And then once it's inside a group, we can go ahead and set a width. So now when you save and you go back to the front, look at that. It pulls all back in nice and pretty. Now it's starting to look like we actually know what we're doing over here. So as you'll see, we're like 90% of the way through this front page look. And then what we can do is we have massive work to do here. I thought it was, when I was looking at it before, I thought it was like a pull-in with a plugin from like Instagram. Because if I was going to do it, I would probably do it that way. But we'll replicate because basically they're just using, it looks like a Kadence Kadence block that is just basically doing a gallery. So they just add a whole bunch of images into here, into the gallery, and it just puts them all in here in a nice little pretty rotator banner. Gutenberg doesn't have anything that's kind of like this, so we can kind of fudge it a little bit. I would probably suggest, if you're going to do this on an actual site, that you would find a plugin that would pull in Instagram or pull in your personal feed of images. That way it would also stay up to date based on what you're actually doing. We'll put a gallery in here, faking in place. I'm pretty sure it's not going to look anywhere near as pretty, just because I know how Gutenberg's blocks work, and the gallery is probably one of the least loved default blocks that exist. So we'll go ahead and grab a couple of these pictures just so that we have something to work with. But expect this part to look rough, everybody. I'm expecting this is going to look horrible. But we can only work with what we can work with because I don't want to pull in plugins and additional things. Kadence has a free version of their toolbar, probably after their plugin actually that probably does have this function. So if you love an image scroller, then it's good. These don't loop. These don't go to posts. These don't go to anything. So I mean, their SEO value is pretty low. That's why I was saying it would be better if it pointed to something, whether it was a post for each one of them about a specific topic or to Instagram, so that you're getting some kind of movement in people around your site and to everything. That's what I would suggest instead. But we'll go ahead and put the gallery in here. We'll put images in here, and it's going to look real rough, guys. Real rough. So we'll go ahead and jump back to the front. This refresh is going to be brutal. Yep, there we go. Now, first thing, just like the other things, there's no width control, so we've got to change to a group. If we're going to do the 1,000, we got to keep the 1,000 the whole time, so we got to pull this back in and at least make it the same width as everything else. I do believe galleries inside the WordPress side, I think, is 7 or 8 pictures max in the columns, which might make it small enough in the end. So if you really wanted to try and duplicate something similar, you could probably dump it all the way to 8 columns by adding 8 images, and the images would each get smaller every single time, so it would just be less space for them. But I just don't think there's a way to make this look as pretty as their site is, unless you're going to go a different methodology. So we're going to keep this because it never looks any better than basically this, no matter how much I've tried to play with this outside of recording. And then we'll just jump to the footer, because that's really the next thing we've got, is to get that padding so we have that same space like we do everywhere else. And then we move on to the footer. All right, so now we can go ahead and leave the front page. It's easier when I do these sections to go out of the templates and into the library. We're going to just go to the footer. That way you're only working with the footer, so you don't get the other blocks. You don't have to pay attention to everything else that's all changing at once. You can just focus on the block, the one part you're actually working on itself. So like all the others, it's a group. It's got 3 columns, and then they stack horizontally when it's in tablet or smaller, which is fine. So as you hide those things, you can see that it stretches back out again, and then the row at the bottom. So theirs is actually got this cool spinner, but it's got basically a top section with that image and a link back to the home page. So we'll keep the image. And then it's got their 3 columns, and then it's got the row stuff at the bottom. So we'll go ahead and duplicate the row so we can have one at the top, which will be that button. We can purge out the miscellaneous stuff we don't care about. And then we can add an image. And then we can go ahead and just upload that new suitcase image. And then we can go ahead and shrink that up a teensy bit. We'll probably just do 50%. And then we'll want to go ahead and move that to the center so we can go to the align justification middle. And then for the group itself, we actually have to go change these colors because it should be that black background. So we need to just go remove the color white that was in this one. And now we get that whole black look that we're looking for. We can go ahead and give this a class. Same thing as we did before. To make it do the spin, we're going to have a class to target. So we're going to give it a class real quick. That'll just be a thing to reference later when we do that. So now when you refresh, now we see that footer coming together here. Look at theirs. And it's got those 3 sections, but with the divider line in between. So again, we can go ahead and try and find what that color is, because it's definitely not one of the colors we've used before. And then we can go ahead and add in the border itself. So find where we want to apply it, so we can grab and get that whole section. And what we need to do is just give some space to get that break between, and then we'll go ahead and add that color in, paste it, and then we can give it that 1 pixel look, 2 pixel look, and go look and see what it looks like. And then we want to make sure, just like the others, we have to explode this because we only need the border on the top and on the bottom. We don't want it on the left and right, so. And then now we've got those lines. So when you go ahead and hide those, you can see those 2 lines exist now. We can go ahead and make them smaller and thinner just because they look too wide. This is why sometimes you just want to go look at things, just to kind of go see if it is aligning how you expect. Yeah, so those lines look good. And then what we want to do is clean up this bottom area, because this whole bottom row obviously needs to change over to being the black as everything else. I'm not sure where this white comes from at the very bottom because it's not tied back to anything we actually control. It's none of these groups. So I'm assuming it's because the white comes from the site up above where we set the site to be that white color. So we're not going to address that part itself because I don't want to have to go change the whole site to black and then have to go try and apply white. You won't see it because it's at the very bottom anyway. We'll focus on building the rest of the columns itself instead. So inside here, we can go ahead and change these out real quick so they look how they look on their side. We've just got to go ahead and adjust the colors and what's there, and limit some of the text because theirs is pretty straightforward, and just a copyright sign in the name and then the current year. So for ourselves, we don't need the 2 sections. We can probably get away with just changing this over to being white looking and then keeping only one of the 2. So if you're going to keep one, typically you don't want to keep the site title. If you keep the site title one, just so you know, it'll change the title for your site inside the controls. So by changing this one, it changes the actual website's name. So it's a it's a control to be aware of that you don't want to change. You would change this one by changing your actual site name inside the website itself. I hadn't seen that site title in use before, so it caught me off guard. Because see, it broke everything. This was unintended, but it's a good thing to understand about how the site title works. Because if you change that, now the site title changes for your whole site too. So when you refresh here, look in that top left-hand corner, it says 2023 State New England. It breaks everything because it's the site title. So now, I mean, we can grab the privacy and we can clean these up because obviously there's 3 on the bottom of Popcorn's default layout. We really only want to have 2 that are in there. So we can go ahead and just make everything white, but see their links so that it's not going to work the same way. You can turn them on with the color and change them. I'm just going to unlink everything for now. If you were to press the 3 dots above there, you could actually add in links as your colors if you wanted to change the colors. For now, I'm just going to turn off the links because I don't have those pages in the first place. But we can go ahead and make it look how it's supposed to look. We can always play with the links later if we wanted to make links. So right there, 3 dots, you would just go to link. And that way you could set the link color. So in this case, the link color itself would be white. And then you can make it hover color to a different color. And then we want to change on case so that everything is uppercase. So now we can come back into here and everything will be capitalized. We'll purge those off and just basically fill this in with their default text itself for the terms. I'm just going to make a new one so I can paste it in and copy it. It's just so much easier to grab this way. You can paste that back in. And then there we go, that part is done. So now we're starting to come together. It's starting to look a lot like their site. So now we can go ahead and grab that first column's data. So just get that text so that we can go ahead and clean up this section. And then we can delete out this. We can delete out this. And if we get rid of that, we can go ahead and paste in a paragraph of our text, align it to the center. And then we can just adjust this a little bit and make sure that we are basically going to get rid of that background, give our text that white color that it needs, and just make sure that we in general look good when we're on the front end with it. So there we go. Now it looks like it's in the space. We do want to typically try and make sure that it's aligned in the middle, but we can do it a little bit of a manual way by giving it some padding itself, just to give it some centering overall. And then we'll go ahead and do the same thing here. We need buttons, so basically we need to purge out everything that is inside here and just create a row of buttons. So much like the other time, we're going to go ahead and we can create a button itself, and then we can center align the buttons itself and give ourselves that same spacing to mimic the first box. And then we can go ahead and come in here, center align it, and then add the button text itself. So we're starting to look like we've got something, looking real clean and precise. We got to add the radius to get that pill shape, and we got to go ahead and take a look and see what theirs looks like as to that gray outside, just so that we kind of color match them. And then we'll set that as the actual background color. So when you go paste this in, now we get that gray color. And then for the text, we can just go ahead and select that green that we've already put into the theme as our color for the text. So now we've got that together itself. And I know there's supposed to be 2 buttons, but if you build 1 button, then you can just clone it to make the second button. So do all the work on the first one, so that way you can just duplicate it and put in a new title on the other one, and they'll be exact matches of each other. So this way you can give a little bit more space if you think it needs it. And then once you're happy with everything, we can go ahead and look at duplicating. Now we can change this to just say contact. And now we've got them both in place. So if you go to the front and we refresh, hey, look, now we've got 2 buttons in the center. And then we've got the last one, which is just the follow on Instagram. I don't know if there's a way in Gutenberg to do this block. So we're going to be creative. I'm just going to grab an image and we're just going to do it with the old-fashioned text and an image and then just align them underneath each other. So we've got to purge out everything that's in there. And then, of course, come back in. We can go ahead and add in our new line. And then basically paste in that text. So now we get that. We can center align everything so it looks like theirs. Make it a little bit smaller font because theirs is definitely smaller. And then they've got that little logo, which is an SVG. So I'm just going to go grab an image and we'll be right back. All right, so I grabbed the quick icon just so we have something as a space holder for now. I would say go to Instagram, go find them, and they have their official one. I have no doubt somewhere. I just was trying to look and I couldn't find anything. So this one is easy enough. We can just put in an image in here, and then we can just paste in this one, and we'll basically look just as good itself. So we're going to go ahead and we're not going to convert this block. I'm going to go ahead and just add a blank line afterwards, and then add image. And then inside the image, we'll just go ahead and upload up that image that I got of an Instagram that's got the see-through, and then we'll just shrink it way up and then shrink it even more to make it, close to that size. And then we'll just go ahead and center align that bad boy, which will put it directly underneath that arrow that we already did, which will accomplish the same thing. We can kill any padding that we see, but there's only so much we can do with this part to just cut down on that space. But if we save and we go to the front end, you'll see now you look at the front and now it's a little bit off. So we've got that same padding that we could do that we did on the others. If we do this, then we start to make everything look alike. So we got to go take this all the way up like we did on the others. So when you select that column, we go take a look. You're just trying to double check, right? Make sure that we're on where we actually set this. So there we go. Now we're looking like there. So we clean these back up. I like to try and keep the same element. When I mess something up, I got to clean it back up again. So on the main column itself is where we should have these. Pull that back down, go over to column. You always want to try and keep it clean for yourself later. And then when you save it and you go look again, now it's starting to look good. And then we can go look and see how we look and what we look like. And then all we really have left is to shrink this down so it's the same 1,000 that everything else is. Pull it in that last little bit. That makes it look just like it would for what you're wanting. And then from that point forward, we can look to just fine tweak a little bit of these things. We still have the spinning icon. I'll include the CSS for it. Basically, you can just look at their code and what they did, and you're going to look for 2 different things. You're going to look for what the class has, and then you're going to look at what the hover for the class is. So there'll be 2 different states. One that's going to tell it to spin the 360 degrees, and then one that's going to tell it when it's hovered on, or the hover is going to tell it to spin the degrees needed to come back around in a circle. But then there's going to be added class on the non-hover that's going to give it the time so that it gets that delay that you see the whole animation effect actually occur. But it's not interesting to see because it's a lot of individual code itself. It's just easier to provide those parts so that you can just copy and paste it. So what you see right here is on their website, that's the transition. So it's saying that it's 0.7 seconds and it eases in and out to do that spin that it does. So we just can clone that section over and have that controlled. And then basically what we have below, which is the transform and rotate to do 360 degree rotation, basically gives it the time. and the delay. So that way you get that cool, smooth spinning, easy transition. We copy those real quick, and then we actually just go add it to the customizer. So inside popcorn, you have to go turn that on in the first place. So when we come in here, you actually have to go into the popcorn settings. And then you would go down and actually turn on the legacy customizer for this, and then save. And then you go back to the front end and go to customize. And then in custom CS or additional CSS, you just paste in those two things because that's what's controlling that spin itself. And that way you get the spin effect on the front end too. And you get this page. So you scroll down and now we get all the effects and we've got this whole site, front page done. There's always tons of tweaks. We'll go ahead and cover the single page on the next video because this was a lot to take in just to do a home page. But the home page is where all the real work comes in because most posts are pretty straightforward and require far less conversion to make them work right.